you wrote an article recently for an academic journal where you talk about this concept of studying up in relation to activist research, the kind of research that you do. So could you talk a little bit about that concept in relation to simultaneity as you're framing it, and also how it relates to the sort of theoretical, epistemological, methodological, and political dynamics of what you do in your work?
Yeah, I think in that article, I talk about how through my training within educational policy studies that I was taught that the gold standard of activist research is youth participatory action research. I admire the work of folks like Michelle Fine, where young people are mobilizing, and that mobilization is at the center of their research, and try to figure out how academics and the university can support young people in conducting research that supports social movement work. And when I started this project, I approached a community organization to ask, hey, do you want to do a PAR project on countering violent extremism and other anti-Muslim policies? And the organization said, look, we've got that covered. Our young people are studying, they understand racial profiling, they understand these policies. We actually don't need you to do that. What we need you to do is, you're an academic, you can fly places, people take you seriously. We need you to actually figure out what are the national security policies that are affecting our communities. Go talk to these people. What are they saying? What are they trying to achieve? What kinds of narratives are they talking about? And so it was sort of through that very humbling moment of the thing that I think I have to offer. I don't really have anything to offer this community group, right? But they're saying your privileged position allows you to do some things that we can't do. And so we need you to go do that. And so that's when I began thinking about studying up as actually supporting grassroots organizing from below. Because the idea was that I would go do all of this research and then report back to communities what I learned. How are these programs being funded? Who's funding them? Where are they? Who are the key actors? What are the discourses used to justify them? All of that, they couldn't get access to because they can't get a meeting with DHS, right? They're not going to be taken seriously by state agencies, or they can't just randomly fly places to do this work. And so I began seeing how that work of studying people in positions of power could actually serve really well communities who could then act on them in their own way. So for me, I was more of the intermediary of, here's the information I've learned, I'm going to give it to you, and then you can act on it how you want to act on it, and then I can do whatever additional research you need. So that's where I began to see that activist research actually could be not just participatory action research. There's all these different methods and tools and approaches we can use to support social movement work, and that we actually do have to be creative for thinking about how to organize against state violence.
Yeah, and I remember too in that article you talk about they're significant, even though you have this privilege, right, as an academic. You encountered significant challenges from doing the study. But related to that, what do you see more largely too as the role of academics and intellectuals and ethnographers, especially in terms of responsibility and aiding this social change?
Yeah, I think especially, for this project, I felt accountable to Muslim and Arab organizations who were the targets of this work. And so part of thinking through, what do I write, was also a conversation. So there's one question around, what do I research? What kind of research is useful for the work that these communities want to do? But another question is, what kind of academic projects are actually useful? And part of what communities are pushing back against is a cottage industry of terrorism studies, of this production of knowledge that says they are terrorists and they are the biggest terrorist threat in the world. So how do you produce knowledge? How do you produce academic scholarship that challenges that they then can cite and use in their own work? And so part of that has been writing academic studies, but it's also been about writing community reports. So translating those academic articles into these accessible reports that, you know, identify who's doing the criminalization, like which agencies, you know, who's at the agencies, where is the money coming from. So that kind of production, what I write, has been in conversation with communities for thinking about what kinds of, I mean, the book project itself was write it as fast as you can so we can start citing it, that we can start saying, look, there is this person who has a PhD, who wrote a credible book that delegitimizes this national security policy. So that's always been in conversation, and because at the end of the day, I feel like who I'm accountable to are these community organizations and community groups, and so I can't just write whatever I want for the purposes of my own career. It actually has to be in conversation with the needs of community groups.